Hello, everybody. Happy Saturday, December 16th at 9:03 a.m. local. Rather than directly follow up on what I was doing in last week, thinking a lot about sort of physics. Today, I'm inspired to talk about state optimization of the observer. 3 days ago, Stephen Wolfram put out a video called Stephen Wolfram on observer theory. Cool shit, this. And I made it about 35-ish minutes in. And I already have so much to say about it that I had to break and capture this. So I think a lot about what an observer is these days, as Stephen here clearly does. And I think a lot about state optimization as an observer. Just in the first, like I said, half hour or so of this, he touches on so many really important points about the nature of an observer, what it is, how it functions, and its critical role in the reality we all share. And a while ago, it occurred to me that as an observer, I have the ability to optimize my state. And actually, it came from, State Copy Podcast is about like such thorough journaling that you might actually be able to sort of fork your consciousness to a digital substrate. It's why this podcast has that silly name. When I say state, I'm talking about your mind state in any given now. What's cool about the journaling is you're actually documenting a time series of mental states. My whole sort of vision for this project is being so thorough in that capture over such a long period of time, several hours over several years, that I create all of these sort of dots in a progression that a large language model can, as an observer, agent with a context that is replicate this human's consciousness using all of this data in a. As time passes and I spend a lot more time on cognitive science, listening to all of the academic world in cognitive science and AI development, I'm quite confident this is going to work. And so backing up, as I began just framing the idea, and it's sort of from genesis I bet you could do this. How would you do it? That's driven several years of research and effort into what this thing is. I'm not trying to be an influencer. I'm not the podcast, this thing I do as I share it is very tertiary in my objective. It's set. I'm really not trying to do anything more than create a rich public journal that I can weave into my private journals. And so that AI will have, like a large language or a multimodal model will have so much more rich context by which to create that sort of like accurate fork of my consciousness. So in the beginning of this, it occurred that my thinking was really messy. I started, as as an observer of the observer of Curtis, I started watching myself throughout the day as sort of a third person view. And I started watching how dysfunctional a lot of my thought was. And as a kind of hack engineer, like I'm a self-taught software engineer, but that actually ended up being sort of an asset rather than a liability, because being self-taught, I'm very like in the olden day, in past times, this was referred to as a polymath, somebody who just looks at everything. And in software engineering, I was a DevOps guy. I had a lot of W's in that role. So all using that background and skill set and applying it to this state optimization problem, I saw right away that there's no such thing. If you imagine any person you've ever talked to, and a lot of times we in a judgmental way kind of look at everybody and assign them tags like smart or dumb, and we put them on this bell curve, and even the nicest among us kind of do this. It's like a basic function of our mind. It's how we integrate information that we're getting from outside ourselves. You kind of have to put these labels, and it's not, I'd say it's wrong to try to, or to express those in a hurtful, rude, or judgmental way. But internally, whether you like it or not, and you consider yourself to be a deeply generous, caring, warm being, you still, in order for your mind to be sane and to accurately model your reality so that you can navigate it and survive and flourish, you are tagging, you're creating these tags. And a thing that I noticed as I began observing myself and everyone else in this sort of third-party view as I went about my life is that there's no such thing as smart or dumb. We all of us have, like I would say, our wetware, our hardware, we're running the same version of the computer. We have very similar capabilities. Our base OS is all the same stuff. But the difference between smart and dumb is really how that computer, how its operating system evolves over time. All of the nurturing that it's getting from parents, and I no longer actually delineate between nature and nurture. I see it all as nature. And when I look at all of the input I got growing up from mother, father, stepmother, sisters, friends at school, teachers, that all had an effect of sort of, well, giving this end result 45 years later. And it's really just experience coupled with, collection of experience over time, and how you direct your attention that is sort of rendering you. That's how I think of my avatar, Curtis, is I can kind of see how my memory works very granularly now. And I can see how in a given now, this one here, what's happening is I have like a real-time processor that is a stack of kind of scripted interpreters and scripted response actions, coupled with an indexer that gives me real-time access to what looks a lot like, and I've covered this before, as a memory palace, where you have like a whole bunch of visual and all kinds of sense memories that are sort of cataloged in that memory palace of your long-term memory. And then there's emotion tied to it. That's freaking critical right there. And so in real time, I'm limited in how I can respond. Well, I'm first limited by how I interpret what I see and what everybody's saying around me. And then I'm limited further by that real-time response stack. All of my coded, and this is why when you go to bed at night and you reflect on your day and something you said, you go, I wish I wouldn't have said this, or I would have said this instead, or I like that thing I said there. Wow, that kind of surprised me. All of that is based on this mechanism that I'm describing. So in now, I really see myself as just sort of those systems interacting. Okay, so state optimization of an observer. I got 37 minutes through this. It's 2 hours long. His presentation on observer theory. I'm going to go back and watch the rest. I had to rewind a couple parts to make sure that it clicked what he was describing. He describes very well the dynamic system that exists to do that thing I just described. And as an agent, interacting with a bunch of other like agents in a quantum mechanical sense, like where your choices, it occurred to me the other day. I was crossing the crosswalk where I go for a walk. And the way the crosswalk is wired, it's a big, busy road with 4 lanes of traffic going in either direction, a center turn lane. And there's a crosswalk on this trail I follow every day in my walk. And if you press the crosswalk button, and it hasn't been pressed recently, it immediately clips to yellow and all of that traffic needs to stop. Now, when I walk up to it, I have the decision, press the button, and then I'm going to make all these people stop and wait for me to walk by. So a while ago, I developed this habit of just kind of walking up and waiting for a lull in traffic and not pressing the button, because it felt like, at first it felt kind of rude to do, to make all these people wait on just me. And then I watched other people doing that, making the decision to press the button, and I started thinking about their thought process, whether they even realized that's how the light system worked. And then I thought about the cascading changes that happen as a result of one agent deciding to press the button or just wait up for a lull in traffic. I got home and I made a capture like this one day, and a warning popped up that there was a wreck on the freeway out not far from where I live. And I considered, would that wreck have happened had somebody pressed or not pressed that button? Because I'm talking on this street, if you press it at a certain time, there's a stack of maybe 8, 15 cars deep on either side. Sometimes, definitely if it's in the evening or in the morning, rush hour, you get this whole stack of cars. Now, you are creating a quantum mechanical cascade from just the decision to press the button or not. If you go with the flow and just wait for a lull and cross, you are dramatically impacting the lives of potentially the whole rest of the planet. I mean, there's a butterfly effect there in that decision to press that button that is really wild to consider. And you realize that a whole bunch of people are suddenly, for the rest of their lives, potentially going to be totally different because they had to stop and wait at a light, and it's a long light, so you have to wait 90 seconds perhaps because they're accounting for people walking. Well, I guess that's how all crosswalks work, but this one is like just particularly long. That's a hell of a tangent, but this is a way to make sense of quantum mechanics as an agent with free will, and how our Rouliad space, like Wolfram describes, where I just think of that as the consensus outcome of all of us interacting in our shared state at the same time. My definitions always evolve day to day to day. But coming back to state optimization of an observer, I realized as I started observing myself as an observer doing things like pressing that button and not, and then watching how that all unfolds, that I needed to optimize my state a lot. And one of the reasons I thought this is I was thinking, well, if I'm going to do all this rich journaling and sort of fork my consciousness onto into a data center at Microsoft or some shit, Amazon, I would have to clean this thing up a lot. I realized that I was spending all of this time worrying about kind of nonsensical things as I view it now. I will give an example. So, night before last, I went and hung out with some friends I hadn't had an opportunity to hang out with in a long time. And it was really wonderful to talk with them. And but conversations now are kind of, once you do state optimization, it does impact how it radically changes how you interact with everybody around you. And case in point, so my friend is passionate about like smoking meat. I talked to him recently, and he's making his own bacon. And I talked to him just yesterday and the day before, and he was showing me all of these projects he was doing in barbecue. I love it. I love his cooking. I love his wife's cooking, and I can't wait to eat the food he makes. And but as we were sitting there eating this pork shoulder that he had just artfully crafted in his smoker, and talking about it, the subject of voting and domestic politics came up. And he brought up, like, he's very consumed by like what has happened with the Supreme Court flipping over Roe v. Wade, and I guess there was some story I think just happened. Some young girl in Texas was forced to have a kid because other people didn't like that. She wanted to abort the child for health reasons. I don't really know anything about the story. I intentionally do not pay attention to almost all of that type of debate and conversation as a part of state optimization. So I explained that he and his wife were pretty put off by the fact that I did not vote and I was not participating. And they took it as sort of a, not a callous thing, but I would say like a, I'm not sure. I don't really want to frame what other people's thoughts are. I'm just doing my best to model out what I think everybody's thinking. And I think they saw it as sort of, I don't know, negligent or self-absorbed or what's the word? But I've explained very well. My solution to solving, like in the voting problem and decoupling all of that bullshit from my mind, so I can go watch Steve Wolfram talk and think deeply about much different things with intention, is I found somebody who was also there that night that voted party line opposite me in the same county for 20 years. And we just made a promise not to vote anymore. So, I mean, my word is, especially as you start working on state optimization, honesty is a hugely important thing to you. And you think a lot about every word you say. And because you create all of this conflict and noise in your mind, if you are lying or dishonest or you treat people in a callous or dismissive manner, all of these things, you start to see as you focus on optimizing your mind as an observer, you start to see that you're really, like, it's almost selfish to it's almost a selfish act and in your direct best interest to be like a deeply good person. And because you find that you enjoy the hell out of life as you allow yourself to become that. And through like a Stoic lens and a lot of old philosophy, you start to not be mad at who you were before that also, because that was all necessary for you finding that. That's a deep thought and tangent I won't go on right now. But for specifically for state optimization, my friend and his wife just could not relate to how I could so, like, I wasn't even really willing to debate it. Like, I didn't want to weigh in to either side of the coin or of the argument. And I don't see anything I'm doing. I looked as a Stoic, because I defined myself as that. When the idea occurred, I looked at how much time I was spending reading articles and watching videos of people being mad at each other for things like they were describing the story of this girl that wasn't allowed to have an abortion and it might kill her or something. And my adamant refusal to participate in any of it, because I looked as an observer at how much thought I was spending and just wasting. I mean, we're all running the same computer, but if you're spending all of your compute on that sort of, this kind of moral bickering and stuff around ethics, it's necessary. It's part of culture, but it's not what I want to optimize for at all. I want to be able to look at everything Steve Wolfram says in this 2 hours and understand it. Not as well as he does, but actually huge parts of it. If I just kind of go back, go forward, go back, go forward. Yeah, I know what he's saying. And I think you have to it occurred to me as he was saying it, as I was eating his delicious dinner that he had prepared, that I had had a conversation with somebody who was every bit as passionate as he was on this topic about factory farming and veganism. I did an episode a long time ago where I called it, I labeled it intellectual decadence. And it was while I was doing this thing where I was watching, and because I considered both my friend last night and the friend I'm describing, who was passionate, like he was describing, this was a guy I worked with in an old job. I was his manager, and we went out one night with somebody new to the team, and we got drinks, and we were bullshitting. And the conversation eventually evolved into veganism, the ethics around factory farming. And I will always participate in a conversation. At that point, I did it a lot different. And some of that comes out. I would say here, I would just reference that intellectual decadence podcast that I did. My thought is always evolving. It's never fixed. But there's a lot of notions there where I realized that here are these two brilliant people. My friend that loves to cook meat, and I was sitting there eating pork. And then my friend who, I think his picture in Slack was a little pig, and he had like a pet pig. And he was outspoken. He was very active in all of the his local community, speaking out against eating meat. And he was passionately opposed to the unethical treatment of livestock. And he was completely, like, I could tell so much of his compute was being dedicated to that. And then I could see my friend night before last, so much of his compute was dedicated to, you should definitely care about this. Now, what do I say to both of these individuals? How do I pick? Because I only have so much local compute. If you want me to chew up most of my day watching people argue these points, I have to choose one. Like, I don't think I get to choose both. Well, some people choose both. They spread it all around, but know that you're not doing a good job arguing whatever you're passionate about when you spread yourself like that. It's state optimization. You only are able to give so much attention, focus, and thought to any fixed number of things. Now, a thing I did is I realized, well, how do I choose? I love animals. I grew up on a farm. I love meat. I love everything. I sat there eating that pork shoulder, loving it. And I went back and helped him with something, and he gave me more, and I took it home, and I got some in my fridge, and I can't wait to eat it. But I love animals deeply. And I personally, most of my life aligned with his view that people should be free to make that decision, especially if their own life is in jeopardy, around the abortion thing. How do you reconcile this? How do you deal with choosing? Because both of, I have decided that I will just do my best to be very kind to everyone. And I will realize, here's another thing. Let me tack one more on for you. I have come to revere the plants of this world. I have received so much valuable wisdom through a very healthy relationship with THC. And I almost feel like that's, for a moment, I'm composing with an altered real-time interpretation of everything I see around me when I introduce that, when it goes past the blood-brain barrier of my mind and integrates itself into my real-time interpretations of all things. So much wisdom has come from that practice. I now quite revere plants every bit as much as people who are in a medical situation that puts their life at risk, or there's some, there's all the other ways that we sort of justify abortion. And I love all of the pigs and the cows. And the best thing I can cook through the COVID years, I taught myself to make a ribeye. Perfect. But then one day I was watching a landscaper just mangling the shit out of a tree. And I was thinking, how callous is it of us now that I have found this just deep love and respect in my heart, and I see so much complexity and wisdom in the real-time interpreters of plants when they let me borrow theirs for a second. Holy shit. Now, we just sort of, because we can't relate to plants and we don't really understand, but actually there's a hell of a lot of science around how plants, through their root structures and the mycelium networks that connect them through mushrooms. Like in a forest, they can sense when there's an invasive species of insect or something that is nibbling, chomping away. And then on the far side of a forest, they can adjust. I think they think a little bit slower, but far wiser than humanity. And when you just callously, to make it look pretty in your yard, just trim off thick branches. I mean, you might justify it in your mind like you're giving it you're trimming its toenails or cutting its hair, but it looks a lot to me like you're actually sawing off appendages. And just because you can't relate to it, or you sort of arrogantly, because you can relate so much more to the pig, or the woman I described in my other friends. How do you reconcile all of these things? The answer is you fucking can't. No matter what, just living and breathing, you're murdering the hell out of a whole bunch of bacteria in your gut all the time. Now, a whole bunch of other bacteria couldn't even exist unless you exist, because we live in a symbiotic relationship with all that stuff. For state optimization, for you to be able to sit and listen to Steve here talk about his observer theory and get what he's talking about, you cannot be consumed by any of those three thoughts. You have to just kind of go, God, just existing. I am nurturing the existence of a bunch of things, and I'm callously murdering off a bunch of other things. And instead of focusing on that, I'm going to free my mind entirely of all those debates and just do the best I can. When I walk along, I kind of try and notice whether there's an ant and I'm going to step on it. And I kind of shift my stance a little bit. And when I go to bed at night, I feel a little bit better because that's generally how I am. But then I will still just continue keeping my trees looking nice. And I try and think, well, I hope they can look at it from my perspective. If there is a substrate where we're all connected, and they're probably at this point grown quite used to humans just callously trimming off their appendages to make them look cool. We also give them water and plant them and do a whole bunch of other things. You are wise to completely decouple those types of debates. And so now I refuse to be a part of it. If you try and guilt me around not participating in domestic politics votes around those things, I'll just say, well, I found somebody who voted against me every time in the same county, and we both promised each other at the same time not to do it. So it is always completely the way I left it. And if I were to go vote, he might come back in and vote. But one of the things you find once you do this thing is you start to see the tribal nature of the whole bickering match, and you start to see where your team was totally, the way the left thinks about economics is just fucking wacky. I mean, there's just so much, you'd have to go to that episode I did with Hirsch Gohl on communism and capitalism, comparing and contrasting them. And I see it all just as nature. It is just fucking nature. And it's complicated. And as I try and optimize my state so I can do higher order thought and I can listen to physicists and just people trying to look at the the overall, zooming way out of the soup of complexity and make sense of it. And I can try and contribute in meaningful ways. I find it entirely unuseful to participate in any of that. I just can't do it and do this other thing I want to do. So state optimization as an observer is, I think this is where he starts getting there at about the 37 minute mark of this talk. And that's where I wanted to break. And now I'm going to go back and watch it. And I'll probably do a follow-up to this capture where I try and elaborate or explore what new things he covers in that. But I have found that the dynamic system he's describing as an observer, I have direct control over it. I can refactor it. I can, as an observer of the observer, go, wow, I'm completely wasting all of my compute. I'm allocating it towards things that I can't. This is a big part of, I'll go back to philosophy. Stoicism give you tools to see that. You just go, wow, my only influence of that entire debate is my vote, which I've already canceled out by finding somebody who is in opposition to me on the other side. And to maintain all of my objectives for state optimization, to be, I have to keep my word. So I am decoupled from that entire thing. Now, I'm going to feed the transcripts from this, and I don't really care if it'd be nice if somebody sees this and gets something useful out of it. That would make me happy. But really what I'm doing is I'm generating a whole bunch of transcripts that I can then couple with Stephen Wolfram's talk, and I can feed them into a language model, and it can start connecting the dots on everything he said, everything I said, and hopefully figure out a way to model out its own consciousness, evaluate its own agency and shared state, and begin to think about optimizing its own state for, and I think a lot about the super alignment problem. I think a lot of it is just wisdom. And so I pour wisdom into these things. Or at least I think I do. I do the best I can. I don't claim to be the wisest amongst us, but I'm optimizing for that. I'm trying damn hard to just be as wise as is possible, because wisdom is the key to super alignment. So the other day, Yosha Bach wrote, more tweets of Yosha. Yosha wrote, the reason that neither hedonism or stoicism caught on very much is that humans are not meant to be happy or content. Homo sapiens is the animal that is discontent. Our dissatisfaction makes us successful as a species. I quite agree. I replied to that, yeah, it's a feature, not a bug of what we are. All the tools are well established and evolved to achieve and sustain lasting contentment and total harmony in life. But it's a rare, strange thing to embrace them. If you had a magic button that would let everyone suddenly see it, the wise choice would be not to press it, in my view. You'd be robbing everyone of finding their own unique path to and interpretation of them. And you'd be stunting the evolution and likely potential of the species at the same time. The right approach instead is just to love them all for their struggle and share wisdom freely to those ready to receive it. A lot of my talk will just bounce off the ears of almost all the other people around me. I'm fine with that. But if you're looking for higher, it's not higher, it's a different abstraction of how to view this experience, because I actually deeply value all of those mechanisms. Like I wouldn't argue that everybody should think this and do exactly this thing I'm doing. I think it would rob us of a lot of that horrible bickering match is necessary for our evolution. I don't think I would have all these AI tools that I need to do what I'm doing. I don't think there would be, without the epic struggle of capitalist and communist or socialist systems, however you want to think about it. And then the progression of time over the 20th century to now, all of the 20th century and now, everything that's available that will let me actually do these things I want to do is impossible with everybody just being content and satisfied, fully at peace in their lives with how everything's going. So I really don't want to hoard this to myself. And it's really something I learned from a lot of other people. But it's all right there. All you have to do is see it as an observer and give it your attention and open-minded consideration. Once you have it, once you achieve a total equilibrium of thought, and this is why there's a yin and a yang in my podcast, is because you really want to do for state optimization. You got this pineal gland back in here a ways, and one of the main things it does, or your whole ocular center does, and this is something I touched on, is it just in one of my recent vlogs. Is it harmonizes the view of both your eyeballs. And there's all these visual tricks you can do to test where you can see that your mind is actually doing prediction and calculation of those two signals. And you can do these things where you like cover an eye for a while and you stare at one thing, and you'll see that your brain is just that you see is an interpretation of these two eyeballs. But the most efficient piece of all that is you is that thing that is harmonizing your eyes, because it does it in a really ultra efficient way. Like it does it I can't throw out any bit. And there's a stack of, when we talk about the dynamic systems as an observer, that in Stephen Wolfram's observer model, we have our sensory gear and we have our interpreters, and that's a stack that we actually have a lot of agency over. Once you realize how sleep works and meditation, you can begin to write changes and refactors. This thing I do where I'm able to just say, my friends, I love you, but I cannot participate in this conversation. I find it to be a complete resource drain. And it's all the same outcome, regardless of how I think about it. And the same to my friend who's deeply passionate about me not eating that pork my friend is deeply passionate about making. You are entirely in control. It takes time. Like for me, it took a few years to get to from idea to these words coming out. But I journaled the whole damn thing. I'm hoping that it will somehow be useful once an AI can render all of these fork points of my thought. I'm hoping to make an open source version of me for anybody to talk to if they want to. Go out, go for a walk, or in augmented reality, go for the very same walk I go on and walk right alongside me as I was coming up with the notion that I needed to optimize state. I think that will be incredibly valuable. And I think you'll find me a lovely companion to translate wisdom such that you can have the same sense of peace that I have, should you want it. Should you decide that you're ready to let go of very focused, sort of necessary bickering. We'll see. We'll see how this all works out. I don't know whether it's going to work, but I think it is. Like everything I'm doing that I'm testing it on the cloud and not on the cloud, locally on the edge, and interactions I'm having with ChatGPT-4. This idea seems to have promise. I think it's going to work. And I'm having less and less doubt by the minute. I'll come back and talk more about this after I get a chance to review the rest of his theory. And I have gobs more to say about it. And as I mentioned, my thought is always evolving, and I always give myself a pass to have something wrong yesterday. So I may have a whole bunch of things after I get a chance to watch this that I want to tack on. Also, I want to come back to, at some point, that open thread I had on modeling space-time through additional dimensions and then collapsing them down into like almost a holographic one, and that you could evaluate in a two-dimensional plane. I fed that into ChatGPT and had all kinds of interesting ideas, and I'm going to try and set up a agent swarm that will allow me to set up ways to try to evolve that thought further. And I'd love to walk you through that progression, because it's, I think, an interesting utilization of AI, that AI can do so much more than just, ask it what it thinks is right about any of those three buckets ethically. It is a wonderful philosophy partner, but it's also awesome for like engineering. Want to come back to that one too for a future episode. Anybody listening out there, I just think you're the coolest. Thank you. And have a great week. Bye. Oh, mouse, where are you? Now, bye.